Let's compare empires. I'm not going to have a list of all empires possible, but here we have Spanish, the British, the Mongol, the Roman, the Macedonian, the Assyrian, the Incan, the Russian, the Japanese, the Portuguese, the Qing, the Mauryan in particular, and the Umayyad, which included Al-Andalus. The sun never set on the Spanish Empire nor the British, until of course it did. The first time the sun never set was referred to for an empire was for the Spanish. The British stole the phrase because they're pirates. The Spanish had possessions in every inhabited continent before anyone else, including the Portuguese. Monopolized oceans, the Spanish did. The British did not. Of course, the British are not just the English, but the English were the dominant race in that unequal union where the capital is in England, not Scotland, and where the language is English, not Scottish Gaelic. Monopolized oceans, not even one. The British had to share them all with the French and others. They never had any single ocean to themselves where there would be no competent rival. Even after Napoleon's defeat, there were French bases in every ocean, were they not? But the Spanish during the Iberian Union under Philip II did monopolize most oceans in the cosmos. See my series. The British Empire was not the biggest. But oceans don't count, idiots will say, but those hypocrites know that the British harvested whales from those oceans. How could such profitable food and blubber and whatever else they could get from the ocean, how could that not have any worth? They're saying it has no worth, even though they count empty deserts. You hypocrites. Australia, mostly desert, but they count it. So oceans do count, and you're a bunch of idiots. You sing of the Brits sing of ruling waves, having ruled the waves. Britannia ruled the waves, right? Spain ruled more waves, losers. Monopolized oceans, Spain #1, losers. Then the Portuguese did monopolize the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic for a while. And actually even the Pacific Ocean's westernmost fringe, because the Portuguese were the greatest power at sea at that time, and there was no competent rival. Because Zheng He was a thing of the past, China refused to monopolize the oceans. So maybe China did monopolize oceans, but only during Zheng He's trip, because otherwise they did not really control so much, as far as I know. And because the Spanish Empire did monopolize oceans, it was therefore the biggest empire in history, not the British, those overrated pirates, those losers, forever losers. The biggest was the Spanish Empire. And only an idiot would say oceans don't count, but they would count one grain of sand in a damn desert with no people around. Absolute hypocrisy and idiocy. The most land was the British, whoop-de-doo. I'd rather have the biggest empire than the most land. Most land is second place. Most used language, yes, the English. The retarded English language is the most used, unfortunately. But as far as native speakers, the Mandarin or Chinese is the most used. And English is overrated because most people in Russia don't need English, and so the same goes for like half of Africa. At least half of Africa doesn't need English, even if they know a few words. And knowing how to say nice to meet you in broken English doesn't count. Here in Cambodia, most people don't know English, and they don't need English in most cases, except for international business, for example, and then they do need English. Unless they have money to pay others to do the English for them. So anyway, most used language in the Western Hemisphere is Spanish, but I give the English a point here because theirs is more widespread. But why is it more widespread? It's because they follow the Spanish and the Portuguese, that's why. Without the Spanish, there would be no British Empire. See my video, Spain created the British Empire and the USA. But they are ingrates, and they of course pretend that they don't owe Spain anything. Most land, the British, yes, including those wastelands. Most used language, alright, I'm just going back, sorry. Best technology, the British, compared to these. However, the United States has superior technology to the British Empire. But of course, this is a chronologically mixed grouping. You're not going to, the Assyrians didn't have so much behind them as the British did. They have seen further because they stood upon the shoulders of giants. Without the Iberians to spread their horizons, the English would not have had their industrial revolution. The curiosity was sparked by Iberian exploration. Not racist. The Spanish Empire was not racist. Yes, it had a caste system, but the discrimination was not because a race were considered inferior. That was not the case. For all were from Adam and Eve, according to the Spanish Empire, at least the early Spanish Empire, before it became Darwinian and fell. If it was ever Darwinian, because I haven't studied much about the late Spanish Empire, because that's not of much interest to me, because it went liberal, and I hate liberal shit. Not racist, Spanish. So it wasn't about the race per se. Yeah, they labeled people by race, just like we always label people by whatever makes them stand out from others. That's how you can tell people apart, female versus male, for example. But the caste system was not really about the blood per se. It was about where you were born, which correlated to your blood generally. And if you were born in Spain, you were more likely to be loyal to the king, which is why people born in Spain had more of a chance to be promoted. They were more likely to be loyal. This is a rational discrimination. Do you complain, people who are against the Spanish and who claim the Spanish were racist, do you complain that the Mongol Empire promoted Mongols disproportionately above other races? Yet the Mongols were not really racist. You know that. They considered mankind to be one giant family that they wanted to bring together by force. Anyway, last I checked. So the British Empire was the most racist, except maybe the USA Empire, which was an empire, whether you call it that or not. It's obviously the size of an empire, bigger than most empires, and it functions much like an empire, despite the democratic elements of inefficient government that it has. Then you have, so that's thanks to Darwin saying that there were subhuman blacks. Atheist fiction made it the most racist. Then you have the Mongol Empire. They were not really racist, I think, nor these following. The Roman wasn't racist. Anyone could be a Roman citizen by a certain point. Alexander married Persian women. He wasn't racist, and he was of mixed blood, part blonde because he was part savage of Illyrian stock by his grandmother Eurydice. See my series, Greeks, Latins, Iberians, and Jews were and are not blonde. The Assyrians, I think, were not racist. Sure, they kicked out the blacks from Egypt, but they kicked out a lot of people from wherever. The Incans, I think, were not racist. Maybe they were. As far as I know, they weren't. The Russians, before Darwin poisoned their minds, they went libtarded, and before that, atheistic. They were not racist. They were nominally Christian, of course, not really. They were heretics. There was never a Christian empire, only heretic empires and such pagan empires. The Japanese were racist. They said that their race was from, so it has been reported, the Japanese Empire taught that they came from Amaterasu, the sun goddess of their satanic religion, Shintoism, full of demonic deities. So the British and the Japanese were both racist, and they were both island-based nations, and they were both known for piracy. Many similarities there. And they both got their civilization from the mainland. where was I? Best not racist. So what else do we have here? We have the Portuguese was not racist. They were supposedly believers in the Bible. The Chinese, many of them are racist and were racist, but not all of them. However, officially, I think that they were racist because they looked down on other nations. They were known for that. And the Mauryan or other Indian empires, well, Indians are very racist against each other. So I've heard from an Indian called Russell Peters, comedian. The Umayyad Empire was Muslim, and the Muslims believe everyone came from Adam and Eve. So they're not racist, even though there's a hadith, I think, that said that that there was a black person, perhaps, who had a head like a grape, and that sounds racist, but that could just be an idiom referring to stupidity, not necessarily race, but maybe it was. Besides, hadiths are not necessarily legitimate, not that the Quran were, but you know what I mean. Most influential of these, Alexander's empire, because without Alexander to save Europe from Persia, there would have been no Roman Empire, because Rome would have been conquered by Persians, and the British Empire and the Spanish and the Portuguese would not have existed without the Roman, which was based upon Alexander's feats by the grace of God, and his was based on the Persian, which was based on the Babylonian, which I include here because I have Assyria to represent the region. Back to this. So of these, the most influential I think was Alexander's. However, the Chinese was very influential, like the Qing, and maybe if you combine all the Chinese, they were very influential. But even so, the Roman Empire's offshoots conquered the world. China did not. Even if China could have, they refused to. So, too late. The world had nothing to offer China, it seemed. Except Spanish silver, of course. Which leads me to another point later on. Most geological discoveries, the Spanish. Who discovered Hawaii? It was not Cook, the British pirate, it was actually the Spanish. Why didn't they colonize Hawaii then? Because they didn't need it, one. Two, Spain was controlled by Templars and under the Synagogue of Satan, as I proved in my channel elsewhere. And the elite rulers did not want the Spanish Empire to be too strong, so they made sure that it would not take over everything, lest it, overthrow the rulers if it were ever to rebel. So they divide and conquer, which is why they gave the British a lot of power and saved some lands for the British to take later. And Australia, well, the Spanish were there before the British, as I proved in my series on the overrated British Empire. Let's see here. Oh crap, what is this? So here we have the chocolate and fries and corn. That was thanks to the Spanish. Anti-Islam record. The Spanish kicked out the Muslims from Iberia, of course with some English help before the British Empire existed. And the Portuguese, of course, were practically the same as Spanish. And they fought the Turks together, and sometimes separately they fought the Turks. And of course the Russians did a lot of that too. China fought Islam a lot also. And now we have the situation with the Uyghurs. The Indians fought them a lot, but if you look at the Mauryan Empire that existed before Islam, then you have saved their continent. Spain saved Europe from the Turks, and so did the Russians and the Portuguese. The British have helped the Arabs against the Iranians, and they saved the Turks from Russia, so they're very pro-Islam, the British, despite Richard the Lionheart, etc. Epic Beard, you can see that later. Long Duration, the Roman, and some others, the Mongol not so much. First around the earth, the Spanish. The richest was the Spanish, made silver commonplace, relatively. Jerusalem, that was not something the Spanish had, unfortunately, and yet fortunately also. Destroyed empires, the Spanish destroyed the Brunei Empire, the Incan and the Aztec Empire. So that is that.